Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Felix, who is going to talk more about doing it wrong with Puppet.
Is this on? Yeah. Okay, thanks, Don. Yeah, welcome to this next talk. Bit about me. I have been handling and managing Linux servers since about 10 years, and for the last good 4 years I've done Puppet work for MPeXnetworks. We are a local company in Berlin. We manage a couple of web servers and provide hosting services with a strong there's a strong focus on managing services, high availability, and we use Puppet and Git quite a lot. What I'm going to talk about is a range of these 5 examples of what could go wrong with your or with anyone's use of Puppet. And yeah, without much further ado, let's dig right into it. One very simple pattern that you can use and make your life very, very hard is to try and use boolean values from factor in your custom facts. Why is this? There's a certain amount of ambiguity that arises from just this kind of use. You can hurt your business by putting up ambiguous signs at the road. That may be bad for business. It may be worse for business if you do this kind of thing in your Puppet infrastructure, I believe. Why is this? Let's look at an example fact. Actually, when I put this together, I was going to build some custom fact to show this off, and a couple of days ago I learned of this is virtual fact, which is a thing that exists, and I was delighted because we can see its effect very good. This piece of manifest, it looks pretty obvious, not really going to work. This class is never going to be included, no matter if you're on a KVM machine or an actual physical machine. Neither will this, although it looks so safe. We'll get into the reasoning in a second. What will work is this. I call this a stupid manifest because it will work with this fact, but it will not work with any other variables that are given a false value under normal circumstances. So yeah, not quite a useful pattern. Okay, why is this all not really working? Let's first take a quick look how what kind of values are representing a true in a Boolean context in Puppet. And basically, there's a lot of variable values that will equal true when used in this context, but mostly it's of course the literal true or any kind of non-empty string. Words like yes or intil or some interface name, those will all be interpreted as true, which is basically why forming if statements like this, just looking at a variable and see if it has a Boolean true value, is actually a good idea. But with factor 1, there's a problem. As you probably know, all your facts are gathered by Ruby code. And this Ruby code can be distributed from your master. It can be installed on your machines. And the Puppet agent process will run this Ruby code to get the fact values. The fun thing in factor 1 is that everything will be converted to string. Everything. Arrays, hashes, booleans, all gets a string. So your false value on a physical machine that you asked, hey, are you virtual, is the word false. But the word false has actually a true value. Damn it. So if you are using factor 1, which I suppose most of you are, you should see to it that if you want to return false values, just use an empty string. We have talked about factor 2, or Andy was asked a question about it, and factor 2 will be or is capable of returning Boolean values, so there won't be this kind of problem, and you can do whatever you want. But in the meantime, watch out. Next anti-pattern, using C-like values for parameters, or what I like to call this example is treating Puppet like some scripting language. The thing about the Puppet community is many of us have some kind of Linux, Unix background. We have written loads and loads of shell scripts, Perl scripts. Some may even have dug into C and do some kernel hacking, whatever. And yeah, in those there just is no true or false. So what people in Perl will do, if they want to represent a true value, you usually just use a 1 or whatever floats your boat. But true is not really a popular choice. And false just is not an option for Boolean false, because pretty much the same problem that I mentioned earlier. So if you're used to this kind of thing and build your modules accordingly, then you set yourself up for some surprises, or rather, you don't set yourself up for the surprise, but there will be surprises for your users, because with most Puppet modules, actual Boolean values will be used, and users do expect to pass flags in form of actual Booleans. And some of your coworkers will at some point try and pass the value true, and as you can see in the definition of the defined type, this will not do what is intended. So yeah. There's not much you can do about this. You can write documentation perhaps, but from experience this won't really help until it's too late, because there will be much head scratching, much marveling at why isn't my stuff working. I'm using it correctly, I think. So just avoid. That was quick. Here's one of my favorites. The defined function. The defined function has been in core Puppet for a long time, and it is used to query your own manifest for information about what resources have already been declared in my manifest. So yeah, let's hear a little tale of borderline non-determinism, as I call it. So what's happening in the wild pretty often is that there are modules that do different things but share common dependencies. For example, different pieces of software would like to use the same directory in /etc to place their information, or place additional information for other software. Or there's a package that you use from different parts of your software manifest landscape. So basically, of course, the naive implementation would be to just put the resource in the appropriate classes. For example, many people likely have a class for installing PHP somewhere, also need a class to install Tomcat, and let's assume that in both cases you want to make sure that the ImageMagick package is installed alongside your application servers. Okay, this is all good and fine, but now imagine you have this awkward box for the new customer where both PHP and Tomcat are installed. That'll just crash and burn, because there's a duplicate declaration of the same package. So people have had this kind of problem in all kinds of shapes, and there is a common workaround that we have seen a lot on the mailing list over the years, which is this. What you do is you take both declarations and wrap them in this if construct. So basically, you ask yourself, have I already declared that I need the ImageMagick package? No? Well, I declare it. Great. And this code will actually solve this particular problem. This will work. If you do this, if you include both those classes, they will do just what you would think they should. All right. Problem solved. On to the next one. No, wait. There's problems with that I should have mentioned. What happens if the classes don't necessarily agree about what to do with this ImageMagick package? Let's assume there's a third class that has dealings with this package, and that is our GraphicsMagick class. That is an alternative, if you will, and that does use the same pattern to make sure there are no resource conflicts, but in the opinion of the GraphicsMagick class, the package should actually be absent. So what now? What's going to happen? Well, either of those will happen. And basically, you have to accept the fact that now one of your classes, if both are being included by for the same machine, that one of those will just not work the way it was intended. And I'll admit that this is a bit extreme. You normally will have an idea about, do I want this software on this machine or not, and building this kind of conflict seems a bit unlikely. So here's a scenario that might be more realistic. Let's go back to our PHP and Tomcat classes. I just assume that both will have some additional requirements about a particular package. For example, in one class there could be a relationship to a file resource, or in another instance you'd want the installation of the package to notify some post-processing script or something, whatever should happen there. And here the effects are a little more subtle, but all the more trouble. Because if you're unlucky, then you're losing the notify event that you wanted to have triggered, because it was the PHP class that defined your package. And yeah, these kind of things were pretty hard to debug and find out why some of your machines perhaps are doing it wrong while others are working perfectly. We want to avoid. By the way, this last example has a workaround inside the workaround. This is messy. Anyhow, let's assume we want to do this a little more properly. So we not only protect ourselves against this duplicate resource problem, but we also put an else branch in the whole equation to take further action in the case that another class has declared our package. And what we can do there is do a resource override. This is, in the best of cases, some of you don't even know what this does, because it's in itself not a very clean way to build your manifest. But what happens here is you query your own catalog or the local compiler run for this ImageMagick package that has been declared elsewhere. And in this case, we use this +signment operator to make a change to the require attribute that is present in this resource. So we don't particularly care how the package has been defined. in some other part of the manifest, but we do make sure that it meets our requirement in this case. So as you can see, this might work a little better, but it's pretty much a maintenance nightmare if you use this consistently. So I would really recommend. Quick aside, because maybe some of you have had this problem and have ventured to the mailing list to find a solution for this, and happened over the stdlib module with its ensure resource function. And this ensure resource was designed to solve just this problem. How does this work? Instead of just declaring your resources and perhaps wrapping them in this if defined query, you call this function ensure resource and describe what kind of resource you would have wanted to declare here if you were fearless about it. So in this case, it's a resource of type package with the title of ImageMagick, and it should be ensured present. This has a little more expressive power than the other pattern that would just drop one of your declarations, but it doesn't really solve the issue, because there's still no semantics that will somehow magically merge all those calls together. It just makes sure that they are all compatible, and if they are not, your compilation will fail. Boom. So, for example, this whole notify and require problem cannot really be addressed by using this this function consistently. So in the end, it's not much better than the basic defined function. Won't make you get you much further. So what you want to do for these cases, in an ideal world, would be to wrap your these resources that are depended on from multiple places into a class. In this case, I'll just assume there's an ImageMagick class that takes care of the package, and perhaps other things that need to be managed about ImageMagick, so that your PHP and Tomcat classes can just include this third class. The whole issue about notifies, requires, etc. Doesn't really go away by this, but you won't be tempted to try and get the different metaparameters to work somehow, but instead you will see that you have a clean manifest structure in which then events are generated from the whole ImageMagick class, for example, or you have some resources require the whole ImageMagick class. Of course, the case with one of my classes wants the package present, the other wants it absent, cannot really be solved. Not through this wrapper class, and not at all in a very sensible fashion that I can think of. If anyone has an idea, come see me later. So this sounds like this is actually not much better if you look at the issues we were trying to solve. But it certainly is better insofar that your manifest is now no longer ambiguous. You can it's pretty easy to find the semantics and find out what is going to happen on a machine with that includes these classes. And the most important thing is that there's no longer a parse order dependency here. There we'll be talking about parse order dependencies again. Generally, clashes can also be avoided by declaring resources as virtual and just realizing them wherever you need to. This is in and of itself a good pattern. It's in some cases less powerful, than having actual wrapper classes, but yeah, it's also an approach. I won't get into this very much detail here. Next pattern, using lots and lots of execs, like these guys. No, really. Exec is, of course, the Puppet exec type, and I think of it as a next part of our problems about treating Puppet like a scripting language, which you should not do. It's not a scripting language. Still, Puppet often does see use to implement some kind of how-to or specification document that lays out how should software X be deployed to a system. And such documents often need you to be editing files, running some setup scripts and programs, and oftentimes you need to do both of these things multiple times, and one after the other in a set order. And yeah, I mean, Puppet can do this. You can write a manifest that will first execute some problem to, say, fetch a tarball or a zip file. Next, it will run the unzip program to get its contents somewhere. Then, using a file resource, you put the desired configuration settings in, or compile flags, whatever. Then you run the next setup step, etc., etc. You can do this. It's not fine. What's the issue with it? First, it is basically abuse of what Puppet resources actually represent, because what you want your manifest to do is each resource you declare should represent some piece of state of your machine. So you have a file resource, then you're telling Puppet about what you want this file to be. You have a package resource. You're telling Puppet, please make the system look this way with regards to this package. And exec is really a crutch, more or less, to allow you to manage things that Puppet has no native idea about. So by building this large chain of exec resources, you're basically saying, Puppet, there's a whole range of attributes of the system, and if that gets out of sync, I need you to run a specific unzip program, so you get my system back in sync, which works, but it's not really a meaningful design. An actual technical problem is that you're making your catalog more complex, and that is costly in performance, and these costs are present with every single Puppet run. Also, this may seem a little petty, but if something goes wrong, your agent will spill lots and lots of error output at you. Stuff like, well, there's some exec that didn't run, and then you get a whole bunch of, I'm not looking at this resource because a requirement failed, and also another, and you get pages and pages of error output, and it becomes more difficult to find the actual source of your issues. In day-to-day business, this really isn't desirable, to say the least. So what would work better in this case with Puppet would be if you could write a monolithic script that will perform all the steps that you need. This can come from a template to give you the flexibility that you otherwise have in your manifest, or there's a config file, whatever, and you add a single exec resource to run this once. And this resource should have some condition that tells Puppet exactly when whether it needs to run this or not. Or an even better approach, if it's in some way feasible for you, create a package for your operating system of choice. I realize there's other things than dep and RPM out there, but you get the gist. This whatever runs your system of choice. Also, a quick remark on the refresh only, which will probably be used very heavily in this kind of design that I sketched, with all those execs running in a chain. Refresh only in itself manifests a nice anti-pattern if you want to make your Puppet be less predictable. Use it a lot, and for example, run stuff after Puppet has downloaded your script. The issue is there's on the one hand, imagine you have this deployment script that Puppet manages and is supposed to copy to your agent before the software needs setting up. If that causes the install script to be run, then whenever you make a change to your install script, Puppet will sync this change to all machines where the software is already deployed. And now an event will be generated to all those deployment scripts, and your deployment will run on all your production systems again. Do not want, usually. Also, if something goes wrong, it may not be obvious how you can trigger another event to make Puppet see that it needs to run the deployment script again. So refresh only, avoid whenever possible. So in case this is a little hard to remember about the execs all being bad, I have this mental image that always reminds me of execs, not such a good thing, and that is this. I don't know how many of you remember this, but it's not pretty. I realize this is not what exec stands for in this context, but this mental image always helps me steering clear. So, final and probably most important anti-pattern, relying on dynamic scoping. And yeah, this one's interesting. And seeing as we'll be looking at, as I promised, parse order dependencies again, this is actually another little non-determinism tale. So how does this work? Let's have a quick review of what dynamic scoping actually is. In Puppet before version 3, it was in heavy use, or it was mainly used for variable values. That is, say you have a class foo, and you declare a value for some variable. Then, in the same class, you include class bar. You can use the value of the variable in the included class. So this was important in Puppet 0.25, as some of you will remember, because it was the means to control how a class behaves. It was one of the major ways to parameterize your actions. In Puppet 3, this is no longer present, but we do still support dynamic scoping for resource defaults. What are resource defaults? You can declare a number of attributes for any type you want. In this case, in this example here, it's the file type. And any resources that are, any files that are being declared in this class and do not receive an explicit ensure value will use this ensure present. This is the default for my files. And to date, this will also be the case in class bar, if bar is included here. Or is it? Let's find out. Assume this little class structure. You have a role class for your web server, and say this includes a class Apache, which in turn includes class TCP server, which is somewhat more broad, description, which also includes your central sysctl class. And let's also assume that in the Apache class a default is being defined. In this case, the Apache class has a very distinct notion of what the permissions on a file should be. 644 in this case. So this resource is in use in all these classes that are now tinted in this sickish green. Now also assume that the web server class, the role class for the web servers includes a class for thread optimization, that is a class that will do some system settings to make multi-threaded applications run better, whatever. And this also will include the sysctl class. Now further assume the thread optimization class has its own opinion of what a good default for file permissions is. And it's different from Apache's view, which was the mode should be 644. From the perspective of thread optimization class, it should be 640. So, the big question. Which default will be in use in our sysctl class? Anyone want to guess? Sorry? Nope. Or yes, I don't know. Actually, it's either. And it depends on the pass order, actually. So if the inclusion of the sysctl class is first encountered in the TCP server class, it will use the default that was in effect there. And if that optimization is being evaluated first, well, then that will be a thing. We don't know. Or perhaps we do. I mean, we could just take care that our manifests are designed in a fashion that we will know beforehand which path the compiler will have to take, so that we can be reasonably sure what the dynamic scoping will be looking like. This is possible, but only if the class structure is as simple as the one I just presented. Generally, I'd expect that your class and include relationships will look kind of more like that. And yeah, to make a really to make a guess which class will be the one that definitely, or which class will be the first to include one of those that are pretty late in the chain, will be pretty hard to predict. There's a couple of factors that will influence this, and those can be pretty unexpected. Of course, whenever you include another class on a machine, that will have an effect on this order, because it may be that through including this new class, you reach a class that is late in the chain via this route now, and its scope is completely different. Same goes if you remove classes, and my favorite, even some manifest refactoring can lead to this. For example, you find out that you're including the sysctl class from Apache, but you don't need to, because you have already been including another class that will finally include the needed class. So you just save this unnecessary include, or move it to a more general position, and well, basically you're opening yourself up to all kinds of butterfly effects, in the form of you make a very small change to some part of the manifest, and in some very distant module things break spectacularly. I mean, this was a big thing when we used this for variables back in the day. I really hope that those resource defaults are not being exploited in such a fashion by many. But it's such a cool anti-pattern that I had to explain this. So yeah, what can you say? Just don't steer clear from all sorts of dynamic scoping. All the 2.7 users don't use this variable scoping thing. It will trip you up. And what you should do instead is use parameters to your classes or not, and definitely use Hira. Hira is a way to control the behavior of your classes in a very safe and well-defined fashion. And now that we've been through all the issues that exist with this final warning, you may want to get rid of any need for these kind of features anyway, because those will likely not stick around. They were removed for variables for a very good reason, and the scoping for resource defaults is pretty sure to follow suit. Andy's nodding a lot, so expect this. And seeing as we've seen, all those parse order dependencies are our worst enemy, I think this is actually a pretty bright outlook to the future. So, yeah. With this, I just about wrap this presentation up. Thanks for being an awesome audience. And before we go over to Q&A, I'd like to make one remark on behalf of my employer, because we too are hiring. And we may be the much more attractive company to work for, seeing as we're in Berlin and not only London. So if you're looking for work that is Puppet related, if you'd like to flex your sysadmin and or developer muscles to help our infrastructure and join a young and energetic team, come talk to me. If you know anyone who might be interested in such a job, just send them our way. We're glad to hear from you. Okay, questions?
You said you had trouble debugging the one thing, or it was quite impossible. Did you actually face this kind of issues, or was it more like you catch them up somewhere?
The one with the dynamic scoping?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That tripped us up pretty badly with respect to this this variable thing, because in the 025 days we had nothing else to go by. So what happened was that this final point that I described, this manifest refactoring, where you just move the inclusion of some crucial class to another part of your manifest, and now what you actually did, or what we had in place, was a system where in our general class, for this class describes all of these web servers, and it set a variable that was supposed to send its value to the syslog class, for example. This worked for a while, but if for some reason, because we included some other class for another feature of the machines, now the syslog class was being included via multiple paths, and now the variables that we'd set on the Apache level would just not have their values in the syslog class anymore. So and then you get frustrated, and basically the only way to deal with this back then was to move all these kinds of variables to the node scope or very near to it. So basically somewhere the first class that is ever included from the node will hold your variables, or something like that. It was pretty messy. Any more horror stories you'd like to hear? Excuse me? Virtual resources. No, those are cool. virtual resources are really a powerful tool to for example, there was this question recently on Ask about how can I make sure that I've got a couple of softwares I manage, and there's a set of repositories that I need to configure on the machine so that they can get the packages at all. But I don't want all repositories on all my servers. So how can I go about this? And in this case, really the easiest way is to have your repositories as virtual resources and realize them whenever, at every place where you know this particular repository will be needed. And this is a clean design because there's really not much that can go wrong about the repositories, and you just say with this realize, yes, this machine needs the repo. So you can do nice things with this, but you are limited to the very resources themselves. You will only pull this one resource in at the point where you realize it. If it is a defined type, of course you can do lots of stuff with this. Then you are not automatically limited to a repository, but because this is kind of what Rea was talking about earlier, you basically have a wrapper type that does your additional functionality. But yeah, all in all, those approaches are similar. I think I'm just a class kind of guy. 4 minutes left. Okay. Yeah, then you have not unlocked the bonus content. Sorry. So again, thanks for listening.